All right, go ahead.
You had mentioned something last Sabbath about the Passover and a week of the resurrection or something like that.
Okay. What did I say?
You said something about they don't understand the scriptures and it was a week or something like that.
You're talking about when Christ died and was resurrected?
Yes.
How that doesn't make sense from Friday to Sunday?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, it makes no sense. He said that he's going to be in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. Friday to Sunday evening is not 3 days and 3 nights. So somebody is lying. And for hundreds of years, we've been quiet. We know that that thing doesn't make sense. We just keep quiet. Nobody wants to say anything. It makes no sense. Somebody is lying. It's either Christ was lying or somebody else is lying. That Friday to Sunday makes no sense. That's not 3 days and 3 nights. I know I'm not educated in a man-made system, but you can tell me if I'm wrong. Is that Friday? Is that 3 days and 3 nights? That makes no sense. So somebody is telling a lie, and we either deal with the truth or we just leave the whole thing and go back to the world. The idea that he died on Friday and came back to life, that's what they say. Ask any Christian why you go to church on Sunday. They say that Jesus died on the cross and he came to life on Sunday. That's the day of resurrection. That's why we go. That doesn't make any sense. So I had a brother that called me a few, maybe like weeks ago or something. He spent some time. I have someone else who is waiting right now who needs the same answer because people are asking him, how does this resurrection thing fit in with the biblical calendar? If you say that we have to use the moon to keep the Sabbath, how does that fit in? That's a good question. So the brother is waiting right now. He's in a different country. He's waiting, and I have to put a video out there because he needs that information to be able to address those who are asking him. How can you explain resurrection, death and resurrection when it comes to the lunar calendar? So what we need to do right now, see that nonsense about Friday to Sunday, death and resurrection makes no sense. So what really happened? What happened back then? What really happened at the time of Christ? Can we really know what happened? Is it possible to know what happened? Yes. First of all, they have no idea what Friday is. They don't know what a Friday is. They don't know what a Sunday is. Friday, Saturday, Sunday never existed back then. What they knew was first day, second day, third day. That's all they knew. First day, second day, third day, fifth day, sixth day, seventh day. That's what they were using. Nobody in Jerusalem had any idea what when you say Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They don't know anything about that. Then you go to Colossians chapter 2, verse 16. I say you read from verse 1 to 16. Colossians chapter 2, verse 1 to 16. Paul is telling people, don't let anybody condemn you or judge you for observing the Sabbath day, the feast days, and the new moon days. Colossians 2:16. And in the man-made calendar, there is no new moon day. Look in your phone, look in your calendar. There's no new moon in a man-made calendar. It doesn't recognize it. New moon is only found in the biblical calendar because new moon day is the beginning of the month. So why will Paul the apostle be telling people not to let anybody condemn them, judge them for observing the Sabbath day, feast days, and the new moon days? Why would you tell somebody who doesn't observe the new moon day to not let anybody condemn them for observing it? That makes no sense. People in Jerusalem were using the moon as their calendar. The situation of the moon is just like every other thing. The calendar issues, like every other thing. Typically, it starts from around the Europeans. Back then, they were known as the Roman Empire. Same people. Nothing has changed. Just because somebody is in Trinidad doesn't mean that they are no longer Israelite. Just because you are in Belize doesn't mean that you are not an Israelite. You can call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. You're still an Israelite. So the man-made calendar began in Rome, and then from there it spread around the world, to the point that as of today, even the Chinese are still using the moon. That's why you have their New Year not in January. The Arabs are still using the moon. Russia was the last major country to abandon the moon and use a man-made calendar. Russia. So this abomination, this vile, usually starts from the children of Satan. It starts from their land and then it spread all over the world. All the abomination in this world usually start from the Europeans, the Gentiles, and then spread all over the world. That's just the truth. So back then in Jerusalem, they were using the moon as their calendar. They were not using a man-made calendar. Those in Rome were using their calendar, just like when America sent their filthy, vile children to go and fight in Iraq or Libya. When they get over there, when they go to those countries, that's a different culture. That is a completely different culture that they go to. And then they slowly begin to spread their vile lifestyle. They'll begin to slowly spread that. So in Jerusalem, they were using the moon as their calendar. The moon was being used in Jerusalem as a calendar of the Hebrews. That's why they observed. They cannot observe the Passover using a man-made calendar. Do you understand that? Can you even observe Passover today using a man-made calendar? No. You cannot observe Sabbath today using a man-made calendar. It's impossible. Observe Passover today. Because Passover is very specific. On the 14th. At the evening of the 14th. 14th of what? 14th of January? 14th of February? 14th of March? It's impossible to use a man-made calendar to observe the Passover. And they observed the Passover back then. So when did they observe it? When was it observed then? The only reason why they were able to observe it is because they were using a lunar calendar. They were using a lunar calendar. Those in Jerusalem used the moon as their calendar. That's why they were able to observe it. So we're going to get into what really happened at the time of Christ. What really happened? What really happened back then? Is it really Friday to Saturday? We know that they observed the Passover, and we know that you cannot observe the Passover using a man-made calendar. So it's very clear that the Israelites back then were using the moon. It was not an issue. Christ did not talk about it. Nobody talked about it. The only place that you see where it's talked about is promoting the lunar calendar, and that will be Colossians chapter 2. The only place it was talked about, they were using the lunar calendar. He was promoting the lunar calendar, because back then they were using the moon, and the Europeans were occupiers. Europeans were the enemy. Paul called them the children of Satan, or the Satan. He called them Satan. They were the enemy. So they came with their they came with their culture, and slowly our people abandoned our own culture and followed after the heathen. As usual, we don't have any problem whoring after other nations. We don't have any problem. So If you take a look at, I just wanted to show you something. If you take a look at the picture that I just showed right now, that's so-called American soldiers in Iraq, somewhere in the Middle East. You see the women are wearing veil. So this is not new. What you see them in that picture doing is not new. So they go to, that's American soldiers. Their women are wearing veil in the Middle East. They cover they cover their hair. So back then in Jerusalem, our ancestor was using the moon as their calendar. The enemy comes in and pretend as if he agrees with you, and he slowly begins to pressure you to change your culture and adopt their own culture. That's what they've always done. That's what you see in the book of Maccabees. So what really happened at the time of Christ? He said he will be in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. Okay. So he was arrested the evening of the Passover. He was arrested. Now, he was arrested, and they would like you to believe that was he was arrested and died on Friday and came back to life on Sunday. That's what they would like you to believe. But that is not based on reality. That number doesn't add up. So what I want to do is to take you back. I just want you to imagine. See, you cannot really understand what happened that night or that period if you're thinking about it based on the Western culture or based on your modern day lifestyle. Do you realize that there was no electricity back then? There was no electricity. That's a fact. There was no highways like that, like expressways. You have roads. And people traveled at night, but not that frequent because of wild animals. People did travel at night, but you don't like go on a long journey at night. You could go to your neighbor at night. But to get out and go like 3, 4, 5 miles away at night, that's kind of risky. Even till today, for those that are living in a village. I grew up in a small village. And at night, it gets really dark. You will not be able to realize it right now because you live in a city. And at night, you have all this street light and all this light that illuminate. But in a place where there's no electricity, it could be really, really thick dark. The only time that you could see, the only time that you could easily be able to see at night is during the full moon. During the full moon. And what they did when they did the Passover, that was during the full moon too. So I just want you to kind of understand the period we're talking about here. Now, things was very, very slow back then. News was very slow. So a relative can die, and for maybe a month or two, you wouldn't even know. In my own lifetime, I lived at a time where families will write a letter to another family member. And that letter will be given to somebody who is traveling. So when I was growing up, if you want to communicate with your son who lives in a different place, you have to wait for somebody to come back from where he lives, where your son lives. If there's anybody that came back from where your son was living, then you write a letter. You get a child that will write a letter for you. Then you give it to that person who is going back to where your son is, and they will take the letter to them. There was no email, there was no phone, there was no text message. So life was very slow back then. Things were very slow. And everywhere you go, you basically go with your foot. You have to walk. Unless if you have an animal like a donkey. But they don't fly. They do not fly. Things was very, very slow. And even if you have an animal, how are you going to travel with an animal at night? In the daytime, sure. At night, how are you going to travel with them in the thick darkness? Where's the animal going to go? And these animals are programmed to sleep at night by the Most High. So life was very easy. Life was very slow back then. So that's just a fact. So when he was arrested, do you think that he was arrested and he was put in behind a police car and they drove him to the high priest or whatever? Then they drove him to the governor, and the governor says, no, I don't want to have any part in this. Then they drove him back. Do you really think that that's what happened? So when he was arrested, he was now taken. They have to walk to go to this place, and then from there go to the governor, and then the governor is like, I don't want to have any part in. Then they go back. They were going back and forth. This took days before he was now handed over into the hands of the soldiers. They humiliated him. Remember that the wife of whose wife? His wife was had a dream and told him, I had a dream about this man. And then he's like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. Just take him. Who would you like me to give you? They say, give us the criminal. These things took time. This is the timeline of what happened. It took days. This thing did not happen in one. He wasn't arrested on that night and killed and came back in 3 days. That's an illusion. That's crazy. They had to go back and forth. And the soldiers had to gamble with his garment. He was put on the cross. It seems like he was forever on that cross, dealing with the thieves, dealing with his mother. John chapter 19. People came over there and say, save yourself. Why don't you get yourself down from the cross? He had to talk to his mother. John chapter 19. He was on that cross for a while. Then when he finally died, the rich man had to go get permission for his body to be released. They grant permission, then he had to go back. They were not traveling with private jets. They were not traveling with cars. Life was slow back then. All these things took days. Yeshua was kept for days. He was killed at least 2 to 3 days after he was arrested. He wasn't killed that night. You're going to have to go to your Bible and rip out some papers and throw it away if you believe he was killed that night he was arrested. He had to be humiliated by the soldiers. He had to be sent back and forth. The wife had a dream. The wife of the governor, whatever, had a dream. It took days. Yeshua was not killed the next day. He was kept for days. Then he was now killed. So from the time he was killed, they now put him in the tomb. But the man had to go get permission to get his body. It took days before this thing happened. It's not the Christian version that we've been told. That makes no sense. It just creates confusion in your mind. You know it's not true, but you can't say anything because nobody's supposed to speak against Christianity. And if you do, then you're crazy. So he was now buried. So now you go to Matthew 28. It tells you that after the Sabbath. How can that be after the Sabbath when he was arrested on the Passover? When do you keep the Passover? I thought the day after this Passover is a Sabbath day. The Feast of Unleavened Bread. That's a Sabbath day. So he observed the Passover and ate the unleavened bread. He was arrested. So how do you now have these women going over Matthew 28, verse 1? And it says, at the first day of the week, after the Sabbath, as he was dawning towards the first day of the week. There were days in between that Sabbath around the time he was arrested to the upper Sabbath. That's days. And that's about 1 week. That was able to cover him being arrested, him being humiliated, him being taken back and forth, him being put on the cross, and then put down and put on the tomb, and being there for 3 days and 3 nights, and being able to come out by the time they went over there the day after the Sabbath. That's about 1 week. It's not the 3 days and 3 nights, like the Friday to Sunday that the Christians are telling you. But why would you expect them to tell you the right thing? Why would you expect the white man to teach you the Bible? They shouldn't be teaching you the Bible. They should not be teaching you. So it took about
so was he crucified on the 14th?
Excuse me?
Was he crucified on the 14th?
When did he eat the Passover?
The night before.
Night before what?
The Passover.
So how can he also be crucified when he ate the Passover?
No, he was crucified according to what's written in there on the Gospels. He was crucified the day after he ate the meal with his disciples.
When do they usually eat the meal?
The night before Passover.
When is
the 13th?
When is the Passover?
The 14th.
So how can
sunset.
So how can he be killed on the 14th? Like as I said,
That's when he's supposed to die, is on the 14th.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
So that's my question. He was either eating the Passover meal with the disciples on the 12th or the 13th, because he was dead by the evening of the 14th and resting in a tomb on the day after, which would have been the Sabbath.
So what makes you say that he was dead by the 14th?
Because the disciples went to keep the Passover after the crucifixion.
But I thought he ate the Passover with the disciples.
No, he ate the last meal with them. He didn't eat the Passover meal with them.
Did he tell them to go and prepare a place for the Passover?
Yes, he did.
Okay, what did he eat with them that evening?
The last meal.
What is the last meal?
He made the meal with them and had them break the bread and all that.
Uh-huh.
Not unleavened bread, but bread.
Mm-hmm. Why is it not unleavened bread?
Because if it was unleavened bread, it wouldn't say risen in the Greek for that text.
Mm-hmm.
It says it's the bread had yeast in it.
Yes.
Or leaven. Sorry, it had leaven.
Okay, so if Christ died on the 14th, then there's a problem, because there's timeline, event, arrested, went back and forth, eventually handed over to the Romans. They humiliated him. They put him on the cross. John 19. This did not happen in one day. It's impossible. It's impossible.
I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah.
If you go back and you look at the timeline, he was actually arrested and taken the night of the 12th.
Yeah, if you, that will be, if you're looking at it. So the whole reason why I'm doing this is because they did not use a man-made calendar. They were using the moon to observe the Passover. That's what they're using. So when he told them to go and prepare a place, he told them to go prepare, like he says, that the Passover was coming up. He told them to go and prepare a place for them to eat the Passover. So, like he told them, I'm not going to do this Passover again with you until I do it. I'm not going to do it again until I do it with you again. So what happened is that they now took that law of the Passover. What Christ was actually telling his disciples is that you should keep on eating the Passover. Do this in remembrance of me. That thing has been taken and perverted and turned into what they called, what do they call it? That thing that they do, that they eat bread every Sunday. They eat biscuit, crackers. Communion. So that's perversion of Passover. What Christ ate, what Christ told the disciples to eat is a Passover. He told the disciples to observe Passover, and that's once a year. Holy Communion has nothing to do with Christ. This is their little perversion of Hebrew culture. Because as you can see in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 14, from verse 22, the Most High said, buy strong drink when you go for the feast. So our ancestors were drinking strong drink. That's fine. Even women drink strong drink. Like Paul tells them, don't drink too much. As you can see in the book of Titus, you can drink alcohol, but not too much. But I'm not talking about man-made alcohol. I'm talking about natural alcohol, like palm wine, because it came straight from palm tree with nothing added. The highest thing it could do to you is to make you drunk. That's it. So we drank alcohol. Everybody, men and women. And the Most High say, enjoy yourself with alcohol. Deuteronomy chapter 14 from verse 22. So what they did is, their crackers, they do on their so-called Holy Communion. And their wine, that's their little perversion of Passover. So to distract you from the fact that Christ says to observe the Passover once a year, not every Sunday. So he ate with his disciples and he was arrested. But this cannot make any sense. You cannot understand this if you don't understand that they were using the moon as a calendar. And usually you have the Sabbath in the middle of the month around the Passover. Then 7 days later you have another Sabbath. That corresponds with Matthew 28 verse 1, when those women went over there. So all these things, this timeline, these events that happened, things were slow. And remember, they wouldn't be walking fast. He wasn't in a hurry. He was not in a hurry to hang on a cross. So when you take somebody and you're walking them on the street, they are criminals. You see them as criminals. They walk slow. They don't walk fast. So they didn't have cars like we do right now to be able to go back and forth. 35 minutes later, they are meeting with the high priest. 40 minutes later, they are at the governor's house. It wasn't happening like that. So it took days for these things to happen. With the lunar calendar, it makes more sense. And everything fits in within that timeline. Being arrested around the Sabbath and being so it took days. It's not Friday to Saturday. To Sunday, sorry. It is not Friday to Sunday. That, as they say. And I don't think, I don't know if it's complicated to understand. But we have been given a narrative, and we know it's not true, but we don't really know what happened. And if you and I never knew about the lunar calendar, if we never knew about the lunar calendar, we would have died not really understanding what happened for that crucifixion. So he was there for 3 days and 3 nights. Plus, from the moment he was arrested, going back and forth, humiliated when he was handed over to the Romans, and then he was on the cross. These things happened before he died. He died 3 days later, 3 days and 3 nights later, he was gone. Before the women went to the tomb, after the Sabbath. So he was arrested in the middle of the month. Actually, he will be coming back to life, like in this period that we're in right now. This is the 3rd Sabbath of the month. He was arrested around the 1st Sabbath of the month, and he came back to life around the 3rd Sabbath of the month. That's when the moon will be half again. After the Sabbath, by the time they went there, he was already up. That's within 7 days. That's really, with the lunar calendar, this fits into that 1 week time period. So I think that I can understand why it might be kind of confusing if, not us not kind of thinking of what things might be like back then. They didn't have cars and all that. Things were very slow, very slow.
So he was not crucified on the 14th.
That's why I ask you, how could he be crucified on the 14th if he ate the Passover or if he ate with the disciples? Do you understand what he ate with the disciples?
Yeah, the last meal.
What is the last meal?
It was the meal that he had before he was crucified, according to the text.
Yeah, the Passover that he ate, that's like, if you want to call it the last meal, yeah, that's last meal. But remember, he told them to go and prepare a place to eat the Passover. I thought that's what it says. So
if you read the context, it's Matthew 26:19 and 18 is where it starts.
Mm-hmm.
And let me see where I go back up.
Yeah, go way back up. Go way back up. If
26.
Go.
In Matthew 26, it says, I gotta go all the way back up here. 19. Then one of the 12, Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priest, and he said to him, "What wilt thou give me?" And then verse 17, it says, "Now the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying unto him, Where wilt thou that we prepare to eat the Passover?" So this is on the 14th, when it says, "Now on the first day of the feast of unleavened bread," the feast of unleavened bread, that's the 14th, according to Exodus 12. First day of unleavened bread is the 14th, and the 15th is what they call in the New Testament the first day of unleavened bread. They call that the Passover, but it's actually 2 separate days. So it says, "Now on the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, Where wilt thou that we would eat the Passover?" And he told them to go into a city and find a man, "Master, and the time is at hand, and go keep the Passover at thine house with his disciples." And the disciples did as Jesus had appointed them, and they made ready the Passover. Now when the evening was come, he sat down with the 12. So it was on the day of the first day of unleavened bread. That would be the 15th, according to Leviticus 23 and Exodus 12. So the 14th had already passed. So the 14th is a Passover, and the first day of unleavened bread is the 15th. if we're going to stick to the narrative of what Yah told Moses.
Okay. So the problem is,
So was he killed on the 15th?
no, he wasn't killed on the 15th. Again, he wasn't killed right away after he was arrested. Okay.
Well, I mean, okay, so I'm just trying to stick with the narrative of what this story says.
Yes.
He was arrested on the 14th, because the night after they ate this meal, he was arrested. So he was arrested on the 15th or the 14th.
He was arrested after they ate the meal. So I was telling you to go up.
Okay,
I was telling you to.
Now he wasn't killed on Passover then.
Oh yeah, because the narrative, the idea is that, like, people say he is the Passover lamb, he is the Passover lamb. Okay, he's the Passover lamb, but he wasn't killed right away. He wasn't killed on the Passover. So if you think, okay, Christ is the Passover lamb, he is the Passover, okay, all right, he was used to make an atonement. But if the only way that you can make this to fit is to backdate what happened, so in that way he will now be killed on the Passover. So that certain things has to be backdated, like he was arrested on the 12th or something. So in that way, that will put him being killed on the Passover, to go with that narrative. Now, like you're going to read, and I was telling you to go back up. If you go back up to the beginning, look at from verse 1.
Verse 1, okay. It came to pass when Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said unto his disciples, Ye know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified.
So
That would be the 12th.
So yeah, he's speaking on the 12th.
Right.
He wasn't killed on the 12th. He's speaking. He's saying that in 2 days, the Son of Man will be betrayed to be killed, not be killed in 2 days. So that process begins in 2 days. Okay, keep going.
Okay. Then assembled together the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people unto the place of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and consulted that they might take Yeshua by subtlety and kill him. Verse 5. But they said, not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people. Now, when Jesus was in Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, there came unto him a woman having an alabaster box of very precious ointment, and poured it on his head as he sat at meat. But when his disciples saw it, they had indignation.
Okay. Could you please jump down to verse 26?
Verse 26.
So remember that he said that in 2 days will be the Passover, right?
Yeah.
In 2 days will be the Passover. Okay. So jump down to verse 26 and continue reading.
Verse 26. And as they were eating, Jesus took bread and blessed it and brake it and gave it to his disciples and said, Take, eat, this is my body. And he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, Drink ye all of it, for this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. But I say unto you, I will not drink henceforth of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. And when they had sung and
Wait a minute. Wait, stop. Drink it with them. Where?
in my Father's kingdom.
I thought Jesus was God. Who is his father? I thought he is God. Whoa, okay. Keep going.
Okay. And when they had sung an hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives. Then said Jesus unto them, all ye shall be offended because of me this night.
Okay. That's what I wanted. That's so he's after they ate. He said that all of you will be offended because of me tonight. This night.
Right.
Okay, keep reading.
For it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered abroad. But after I am risen again, I will go before you into Galilee. Peter answered and said unto him, though all men shall be offended because of thee, yet will I never be offended. Jesus said unto him, verily I say unto thee, that this night, before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. Peter said unto him, though I should die with thee, yet will I not deny thee. Likewise also said all the disciples. Then cometh Jesus with them unto the place of Gethsemane, and saith unto the disciples, sit ye here, while I go and pray yonder. And he took with him Peter, the son of Zebedee, and began to be sorrowful and very heavy.
This is happening that night, right?
Yes, it's the same night.
Okay, keep going.
Hold on a second, I have to cough. Okay. This is that same night. Where's I stop? Oh, heavy. 38, verse 38. Then said he unto them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry ye here, and watch with me. He still hasn't been arrested yet.
Mm-mm.
And he went a little farther, and fell on his face, and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. And he cometh unto the disciples, and findeth them asleep, and saith unto Peter, what? Could ye not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, that ye enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. He went away again the second time, and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup may not pass,
your mic is off. I think you may have accidentally turned off your mic. Okay, brother, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. What verse did you last hear me at?
While he was saying, if this cup, if you're not going to take it away from me.
Okay. What verse was that?
During the second prayer, when he started again, so that will be verse, when he went back the second time, you can start from verse 40. Or you can start from verse 40.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll start from verse 39. It's up to you.
39, okay. And he went a little farther and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. 40. And he cometh unto the disciples, and find them asleep, and said unto Peter, What, could ye not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, that ye enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. He went away again the second time, and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, thy will be done. 43. And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. And he left them and went away again, and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Then came he to his disciples, and said unto them, Sleep on now, and take your rest. Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. 46. Arise, let us be going. Behold, he is at hand that doeth betray me. 47. And while he was yet spake, lo, Judas, one of the 12, came, and with him a great multitude with swords and staves, from the chief priest and the elders of the people.
Okay.
Now,
so what we're going to do is, so at this point they approach him to arrest him. So could you read a little bit from verse 57?
Okay. Yeah, because he still hasn't been taken by them yet. 57. And they that had laid hold on Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled.
Verse 58.
Oh, okay. I thought you just wanted 57. 58. But Peter followed him afar off unto the high priest's palace, and went in and sat with the servants to see the end. Now the chief priest and elders and all the council sought false witnesses against Yeshua to put him to death, but found none. Yea, though many false witnesses came, yet found they none. At the least at the last came 2 false witnesses, and said, This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and build it in 3 days. And the chief priest arose and said unto him, Answerest thou nothing? What is it which these witnesses against thee? But Yeshua held his peace, and the high priest answered and said unto him, I adjourn thee by the living Elohim, that thou tell us whether thou be the Messiah, the Son of God.
Okay, so drop down to verse 69.
69, verse 69. Now Peter sat without the palace, and a damsel came unto him, saying, Thou also was with Yeshua of Galilee. But he denied before them all, saying, I know not what thou sayest. And when he was gone out into the porch, another maid saw him, and said unto them that were there, This fellow was also with Yeshua of Nazareth. And again he denied him. He denied with an oath, I do not know the man. And after a while came unto him they that stood by, and said unto Peter, Surely thou also art one of them, for thy speech bewrayeth thee.
Now hold on. Mind you, that when this was going on, you have a whole different event going on with Yeshua and the high priest and the elders. That was going on over there. And Peter was on the side watching. And now he's being asked that he's being accused of being one of his followers. So these are two different events. This is happening that night. So keep going.
Yes. Then again, he too cursed and to swear, saying, I know not the man. And immediately the cock crew. And Peter remembered the word of Yeshua, which said unto him, Before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice.
Okay.
And he went out and wept bitterly.
Then let me ask you a question. What is a cock?
Depends on the. It's a chicken.
It's a male chicken.
It has other terms too.
It's a male chicken.
Yes, a male chicken.
So you do know that that's what they were using for time, like that's what wakes you up in the ancient times.
Yes.
Do you know the period of time of the day that chicken cocks?
Yes, he cocks right at dawn. It's still dark.
Okay, so those chickens don't cock at night. So
No.
Usually they wake up in the morning, because chickens, when the sun goes down, they go to bed. They go to bed. They go to the place of their rest. So that male chicken usually cocks at dawn. So as soon as daylight begins to appear, it begins to make noise. So in Africa, you see that a lot. So in Africa, you have lots of chicken, because there's a particular culture that we have continued till today, which is we do sacrifice with a chicken and we let it go. Just like you see in the Bible, you let the chicken go. So you're going to see chickens roaming around a lot in Africa. So, but even the ones that you have in your house, because in Africa we own chickens. Most families do own chicken. So in the morning, whether you like it or not, they will begin to make noise at dawn. So that usually wakes you up. Then you know that, oh, it's morning time. So that usually cocks at dawn. So
he was betrayed on the 14th. He wasn't crucified on the 14th.
No. Well, he was arrested in the evening. But look how long they were in the high priest's house almost all night.
All night, yes.
That chicken was cocking very early in the morning at dawn. Worldwide, chicken does not cock in the middle of the night. It's at dawn. So just at the high priest's house, they were there pretty much that night. It was now early in the morning when this chicken.
Yes.
Now go to start from verse 27. Chapter 27, okay. Sorry. Chapter 27.
27 verse 1.
Yes.
When the morning was come, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Yeshua to put him to death. And when they had bound him and led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate, the governor.
Okay. So this You literally just read 2 verses.
Yes.
And it sounds so simple. It's 2 verses, and psychologically you're thinking, oh, that was just, they led him away, like you see in Genesis chapter 35, with Reuben having sex with Belial. That's just 2 verses. But so because you see this event in 2 verses, it sounds so simple. So when it says that in the morning, the high priest came together and they gathered and they did all this, and he was now led out to the governor. It sounds so simple. You understand what I mean? It sounds so easy, but just look at the time they spent at the house of high priest. And now I want to point something out to you, my brothers and sisters. Just think about this. Do you know that most people don't realize that chicken is what wakes you up in the morning? Somebody that grew up in a city wouldn't know that. You don't usually see chickens regularly. In a small village, chickens are everywhere, like a lot. They roam around the village. In the evening, they come back to your house. The chicken will go around the neighborhood. And when the sun begins to go down, they will come right back to your house. Your chicken will come back to your house and go to bed. Because they know that you own them. Chickens know this. So what I wanted to point out to you here, my brothers and sisters, so you can understand the problem we have in understanding this Bible. Do you think that an average Christian will understand what it means that chicken will cock? When a Hebrew hear Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, say that you will deny me 3 times before the chicken will cock, they wouldn't understand what he's saying. Well, he's telling you that he would deny him before dawn. When he says that this chicken cock here, anybody that grew up in a village in Asia, village somewhere, knows what this means. So this chicken making noise, this only happens at dawn. A regular Christian would not really see this. So they wouldn't understand. Wait, he was arrested that evening. They spent that night when he was arrested. This time was spent at the house of the high priest, going back and forth, trying to get him to say something or something. Peter was on the other side, watching what was going on. The other elders was in the high priest's house. So do you see that this verse 75, when it says that, then Peter remembered that Yeshua said, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. So this chicken crawling here is a sign of when this thing took place. That's at dawn. So that his arrest and that night was now at the high priest's house. Then in the morning, he now was taken to the governor. That starts from verse 20, chapter 29. I'm sorry, chapter 27. Then verse 1 and verse 2 tells you that when morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people conferred together against Yeshua in order to bring about his death. They bound him and led him away and handed him over to Pilate, the governor. Now it sounds like they put him in a car and drove him to governor. No, they had to either take a donkey or walk. It took time. It took time to go from the high priest's house to the governor. Then you start from verse 3. Then Judas commits suicide. This all happened within that period. Judas commits suicide. Now, look at what happened, the process of Judas giving back the silver. Yeshua was now taken off to go be given to the governor. And Judas had to go back now, and from verse 3, Matthew 27 from verse 3, he has to go return the money. And he dealt with the high priest, the elders or whatever, and then he went and committed suicide. Now, it sounds like this was happening within 30 minutes. No, this was not happening within 30 minutes. That brings you down to verse 11. At this point, he was now with the governor. He was now brought to the governor. And it says in verse 11, now Yeshua stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, are you the king of Yehudi, the king of the Yehudis? Yeshua said, you say so. But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. Verse 13, then Pilate said to him, do you not hear how many accusations they make against you? But he gave him no answer. Not even a single. Do you understand how slow this whole thing is? Because he wasn't talking. He wasn't like, hey, let's do this. I want to get out of here. Or I want to get to the cross already. He wasn't talking. Now we get to verse 15. Now at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release prisoner for the crowd. Anyone whom they wanted. At that time, they had numerous prisoners called Jesus Barabbas. Verse 17. So after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, whom do you want me to release for you? Jesus Barabbas, or Yahushua Barabbas, or Yeshua who is called the Messiah? For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. So this is what I told you some days ago. I don't know if you remember this. I told you that the problem between the high priest, these men, it was jealousy. I'm not the one that wrote this. I did not come over here and read this and say and no. If you look at the relationship between Christ and the Pharisees, it was jealousy. It was jealousy. They saw him as a threat. He was a threat for them. Why was he a threat? Because he was teaching the law and people were being attracted, because the truth is the truth. The truth is the truth. The truth sells itself. Yeah, we might reject the truth, but we do know that that's the truth. So even this governor knew that these men were jealous of Christ. Now, they could have been doing what Christ was doing, but they were not doing it. They were not teaching the law anymore. Like they were not. It's about their tradition, as he accused them. And it became like a politics for them. You know, the high priest is like the king now. And how dare you talk against the high priest? So it became like, so to see someone that comes around and people are following him, they felt threatened. Why did John the Baptist stay in the wilderness? So when you're dealing with men who are in charge of the things of Yah, but they're not really keeping the law, it can be a very dangerous situation, because the only thing that holds us back is the law. That stops us from doing certain things. So these men here, it was all tradition that was now passed down from their fathers, from their grandfathers, generation to generation. They were no longer keeping the law. So anyone that hears Yeshua, you may not like him. You may not like the way he talks, like John the Baptist. You may not like them. But you do know that this is more likely to be from the law. What they are saying is more likely to be from the law. You don't have the law. He has the law. He is going to the house of Yah every day to teach the law. So people were going there every day. And why would you think that the high priest would sit back and just watch his power be taken away? He felt threatened. How can I let this man be like, how can I let everybody start following this man now? Of course, there was some spiritual reason behind that, because whether they were jealous or not, he was still going to go to the cross anyways. And he knew it. He knew it. That's why he was praying and begging the Most High, please, to remove that cup from him. So, of course, like Bible prophecy, of course, the people who are going to fulfill Bible prophecy, they're going to have their own reason of why they're doing it. Those that came to invade Jerusalem in 70 AD, if you ask them, they will tell you that, they will give you their own reason. Like one of the emperors at that time said that God told him to go destroy Jerusalem. And people will be like, oh man, he's crazy. Like when George Bush said that God told him to go to Iraq, whatever. So as you can see here, this governor realized that these men are just jealous of him. They felt threatened about their power. So that's Matthew 27:18. Matthew 27:18. For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. Verse 19. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, have nothing to do with that innocent man, for today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him. Verse 20. Now the chief priest and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to have Yeshua killed. Verse 21. The governor again said to them, which of the two do you want me to release to you? And they said, Barabbas. Verse 22. Pilate said to them, then what shall I do with Yeshua, who is called the Messiah? All of them said, let him be crucified. Then he asked, why? What evil has he done? But they shouted all the more, let him be crucified. So at this point, verse 24. So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourself. Verse 25. Then the people as a whole answered, his blood be on us and on our children. Verse 26. So he released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Yeshua, he handed him over to be crucified. Again, what I'm trying to get you to see here is that this took time. This took time. It's not like a movie. This is not a movie where he could be talking and somebody will bring a water and everything is happening within the same period of time. This took time. It took time. He's the governor. They are the regular people. This thing did not happen in 30 minutes. Releasing Barabbas was not in 30 minutes. It took time to go to the prison, get in there and release Barabbas. Then that brings you to verse 27, Matthew 27:27. He was now handed over. Then the soldiers of the governor took Yeshua into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him. So that's the whole event now. Now he's now in the hands of the Gentiles, just like he said. So you could keep going on and on and on. Verse 38. Then 2 bandits were crucified with him, one on his right, one on his left. Verse 39. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, you who will destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the son of Elohim, come down from the cross. So because Yeshua spoke in parable, as you see in Matthew 13, Matthew chapter 13, from verse 34, 35, 36. He spoke in parable. His disciples could not even understand him very well. So they don't understand what he meant when he said, I will destroy this temple and build it back in 3 days. They have no idea what he was talking about. These people were passing by the road and mocking him. So, and they continued, where was I? They continued when they were saying, you come down and save yourself. Verse 41. In the same way, the chief priest also, along with the scribes and the scribes and elders, were mocking him, saying, he saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the king of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him. Verse 43. He trusts in Elohim. Let Elohim deliver him now, if he wants to. For he said, I am Elohim's son. Oh, they're saying that he said that he is Elohim's son. I am the son of God. The Most High also said that we are sons and daughters. So that's not different from what Christ said. So they're saying in verse 43 that he was claiming that he is the son of God. Verse 44, that the bandits who were crucified with him also taunted him in the same way. Now verse 45, from noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And about 3 o'clock, Yeshua cried out with a loud voice, Ela, Ela, lama sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? So, and it goes on and on and on. It's kind of like a movie. I think that the best way for me to explain this will be when you watch a movie. Average movie time is 1.5 hours, about 90 minutes or so. A regular movie time is 90 minutes. Regular. But when you watch a movie, you see how they fit everything in there. Something that happened within a long period of time is fit into that 90 minutes. That's what happens. So, and when you watch that movie, it seems realistic because everything has been packed into that 90 minutes. So what is being presented to you? I get this question a lot. I get this question about First Samuel chapter 21. I get this question, and people will ask me, if David, if that was a new moon day in 1 Samuel chapter 20, how come in chapter 21 he was now at the high priest's house and he was asking for a bread? Wasn't that a Sabbath day? I get that question from different people because they're thinking that if chapter 20 of 1 Samuel chapter 20 talks about new moon day, they're not considering the traveling time. They're not considering. It just like, oh, he was with Jonathan in chapter 20. Chapter 21, he was now with the high priest. Well, if we go by that logic, and you go to 2 Samuel, when the Most High was talking to David in chapter 12, the Most High said that you raped somebody's wife. You took somebody's wife and you had sex with her in secret. I will do this to you in public. The Most High was saying this in chapter 12. 2 Samuel chapter 12. 2 Samuel chapter 12. I will do this to you in public. Then you go to chapter 16. Chapter 13, 14, 15, 16. Then 17, you see it begins to happen. So it doesn't mean that it took days for the Most High to do this. So I just want you to understand, like, when you're reading these things, just because something was described in one verse doesn't mean it happened in the same day. And a good example of this again is Daniel chapter 12. Daniel chapter 12 from verse 1 say that the angel Micheal will be asked to step out of the way. And as soon as he steps out, there will be a time of trouble for the Israelites. And after that time of trouble, the Israelites will be gathered. Those that kept the law to everlasting life. Those that broke the law to shame and everlasting contempt. That's like within 2-3 verses. Within short period of Daniel chapter 12 covers something that will happen over thousands of years. Over thousands of years was mentioned. Daniel chapter 12 from verse 1. So when the angel was told to get out of the way, that's when 70 AD happened. That was almost 2,000 years ago. That's when Israel went into trouble. Their land was destroyed. They were scattered into Africa, and then from there around the world. In the future, those that keep the law will be gathered, and they will have eternal life. Those that broke the law will go into shame. But this thing is described within a short period of verses, within 2, 3, 4, 5 verses that describe what will happen over thousands of years. So things were not as fast as you see them in these verses. Things were very slow, and he wasn't talking. He wasn't in a hurry to go to the cross. He was not in a hurry to go to the cross. Christ was not talking like that. So if we now go over to
Can I say something?
Yes, brother.
What cleared it up for me that the crucifixion did not happen on Passover was in the 26th verse, 26th chapter, and the 6:5. I'm going to do 4 and 5 so you can hear what I'm going to say. And they counseled and took that they might take Yeshua by subtlety and kill him. Verse 5. But they said, not on the feast day. Not on the feast day, lest there should be an uproar among the people. So obviously, it was a feast day when they were saying this. It was the feast day, which meant he was not crucified on Passover. Because in the very first verse, he says in 2 days it's going to be Passover. He hadn't even been captured yet, and he's having a meal with them on Passover. So it wasn't Passover when he was crucified. Because when Peter denied him, that was the night of Passover. First day of unleavened bread, he's standing in Pilate's place. That's the 15th. So he probably wasn't even crucified till the 16th, and he didn't come out the grave until that following Sabbath, which would have been the 22nd.
Okay, you're absolutely right. So remember, you're talking about the high priest. Now, our ancestors were following a lot of man-made custom. Just like Christ accused them, Yeshua accused them in Matthew 15. Matthew 15 verse 1 to 9. Matthew 15 verse 1 to 9. They were now incorporating these man-made traditions, like washing your hand. If you don't wash your hand, that's a sin, I guess, according to them. But it's good to wash your hand, but it's not the law. So the Pharisees still do know the law. They still do understand the law. If they did not, Yeshua would never told you in Matthew 23, verse 1 to 3 to listen to them. They still do understand the law. But they were mixing it up with man-made traditions, like they got from their ancestors. And if you ever say that in their face, they will feel offended. How dare you talk against their tradition? Because these traditions has been mixed with the law. So sometimes you don't really know if is that really the law or the tradition. Remember that back then, we didn't have the scriptures the way we do now. You have to go to the high priest. You have to go to the priest. As we see in Malachi chapter 2. To hear the law, you have to go to the priest. That's why people kept going to the house of Yah every day. Every day. They went over there. Yeshua was teaching every day. Even after Christ, the apostles went to the house of Yah every day. If you want to get the law of Yah, you have to go to there every day. They were doing that. They were required only to go once a week, but they were going every day anyways to go hear the law. So anybody who is accused of teaching against or speaking against the high priest, most regular people have no idea. They don't even know what the law says like that until they are taught. So again, you have to understand that they kept the Passover. What happens after the Passover? The Feast of Unleavened Bread. So even though it doesn't tell you specifically that he was kept, or like the brother read, it tells you, but the people, you hear what people are saying. You hear what they said. We don't want to do anything because that's on a Sabbath day. But why do we not know this? Why didn't we know this? I know about that verse, but Christians have no interest in teaching us that place, because then that will promote the Sabbath. So we kind of like not talk about that part where it says that they didn't do anything to him, because that will be, that will create a problem, because people do realize that you don't walk on the Sabbath, you don't kill, you don't even hunt on the Sabbath, you don't kill animals on the Sabbath, you don't do those things unless if you're doing a sacrifice. So you don't do these things on the Sabbath. So there's to parade this man around, around the village and do all that on the Sabbath. That's a Sabbath day. The people did not want to. These people don't want to create uproar. That's a very good way for you to damage your reputation and really show that this man is right. You don't know the law. You're not teaching the law. So they kind of laid low until after the Sabbath. Then they began to do these things. Then he was now crucified. This will now bring you up to chapter 28, which is the upper Sabbath, after the Sabbath that they avoided. Remember, they kept the Passover. When do we keep the Passover? In the middle of the first month. There's a Sabbath in the middle of the first month. There's a Sabbath right there. That will be like last week. That's when the moon is full. So we have a Sabbath in the middle of the first month. That was the Sabbath that they avoided. Then after that Sabbath, they now began to do the things that they did. And then after that, he was put to death. That now brings you up to the upper Sabbath, the third Sabbath of the month, which is now, you're beginning from chapter 28, from verse 1. That's the upper Sabbath, after they avoided the Sabbath that they avoided, after he was arrested. This Sabbath in Matthew 28, from verse 1, as you can see here, first, from verse 62, it says, the next day, that is after the day of preparation, the chief priest and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, Sir, we remember that the impostor said while he was still alive, that after 3 days I will arise again. Verse 64, therefore command the tomb to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise, his disciples may go and steal him away and tell the people he has been raised from the dead. And the last deception will be worse than the first. Verse 65, Pilate said to them, you have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it as secure as you can. Verse 66, so they went with the guards and made the tomb secure by sealing this tomb. Verse 28. After the Sabbath, as the first day of the week was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. Suddenly, there was a great earthquake. So, these people, as you can see from verse 62 of Matthew 27, they were worried. They were worried about what he said about 3 days and 3 nights. They want to make sure that that tomb is secure for 3 days and 3 nights. So he was there for 3 days and 3 nights. So, again, this is written to give you an idea of what happened. But it took days for these things to happen. Yeshua was not arrested on Friday, or died on Friday and came back to life on Sunday. That's not what happened.
So the 3 days and 3 nights you're saying is not him being in the grave, but amongst the wicked.
No, it's him being in the tomb. He was. But that 3 days and 3 nights included the period of the time that he was arrested, the period of time that was that night, the period of time that he was sent to the governor, the period of time that he was humiliated, put on the cross. Time was very slow. Things were slow. There was no phone. You think that they did this thing smoothly? Everything went fine. Driving back and forth with an armored car or a police car with siren? No. Things were slow. So it took days before they killed him. Plus the 3 days and the 3 nights. That brings you back up to chapter 28 from verse 1. That's the upper Sabbath.
What do you mean upper Sabbath? What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
What that means is that he ate the Passover, right? Yes. Passover is in the middle of the first month, right?
Yes, he ate it and he was betrayed on the 15th.
Okay, so he ate the Passover. We know that when the Passover is usually in the middle of the month.
The 15th.
That's when the full moon is, right?
Yes.
And then we now, the upper Sabbath that I'm talking about is like right now. So this is the third Sabbath of the month that you and I are right now. So last Sabbath was the full moon Sabbath, the middle of the month.
Yes.
We are in the second month right now, biblically. So last week was the middle of the month. So if you had to eat the Passover, that would have been in the middle of, that would have been last week. So this Matthew 28 from verse 1 is now the upper Sabbath, like right now. So the moon is back up to half, the third Sabbath of the month, because there's 4 Sabbaths in a month. So everything that happened within that week, including 3 days and 3 nights on the tomb and the humiliation and the process. This all happened. It's within that period. It is not Friday to Sunday night that they're talking about. That's just too short of a period of time for all these things to happen.
Okay, I understand what you're saying when you said from the betrayal to the cross, that took days, absolutely. And then from the cross to the burial, it was almost a 24-hour period. From reading the text, the women went home to keep the Sabbath, and when the Sabbath was over, they went out to buy spices, so that they could go and anoint the body. That's an all-night thing. And when they got there, the tomb was already empty. So I don't get the 3 days and 3 nights there in that you just said. I'm not understanding that. Everything else I understand.
Okay. Okay. Do you understand Matthew 28 verse 1? Yes,
it says at the end of the Sabbath. That would be the 22nd. That would be this day.
Mm-hmm.
That would be this day.
Yes.
This Sabbath that we're celebrating right now.
Yes.
That's the end of, that would be in the morning of this Sabbath.
So from this Sabbath, 7 days back, that puts you into another Sabbath.
That will be the 15th, yes.
Yes. So the things that happened with Yeshua took days, including 3 days and 3 nights in the grave. Like you see in this text in Matthew 27, these Pharisees was concerned to make sure that the tomb is protected for 3 days and 3 nights. The governor said, sure, go ahead. Take the men and go do it.
So he was in the grave. So he would come out of the grave tomorrow morning.
It seems like he came out on the Sabbath. Because by the time they came
out on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Because they had already went to the grave and it was still dark. So that meant that he came out on the Sabbath day, the 22nd.
Yes.
He came out in the morning of the 22nd. At the 23rd. He came out on the morning of the 23rd.
Well, by the time they went there, he was already out.
Yeah, he was gone.
So that means that he came out on the Sabbath.
Yeah. So my question is, you said, unless I'm just misinterpreting what you're saying, you said, okay, I get the 3 days from the 15th to the 22nd, the 21st. From the 15th to the 21st, I get that, all the 3 days and the 3 nights there. I get that.
Okay, hold on. Okay, hold that thought. Hold that thought. I just want to remind you of this. Do you realize that the Pharisees, they didn't think about that 3 days and 3 nights thing. They didn't include it from the beginning. It kind of occurs to them, then they went back to the governor. That wasn't part of the plan. So they did not plan from the beginning. We're going to make sure that we guard the grave. So they had to go back to the governor. So it kind of occurred to them. Then they're like, oh, we have to do this. Then they went to governor and got the permission with the soldiers to go protect it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you understand what I mean. So he was already in the grave when they went to get somebody to go protect it. Because it's kind of like, oh shoot, we have to go. Yeah, he said he was going to be out in 3 days and 3 nights. Let's do something.
So in verse 62 where it says the next day, is that next day the 21st?
Yeah, that will be the day
before the Sabbath.
Before the Sabbath, as they are getting ready. Because the preparation day is usually the day before the Sabbath.
Yeah.
So that's when as you can see, they didn't plan into protecting the grave from the beginning. So that's why they had to go back to the governor and say, can you give us some people to protect the grave? Because we just want to make sure. So they were worried about him being able to come out or them going to take his body and then claim that he was there 3 days and 3 nights.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So from the verse 62, that would be where it says now the next day. That would be the 21st.
Yes.
Okay. And then 3 days after that would be the 24th.
The reason why I'm kind of careful with the numbers is because we don't know if they had a 1 day new moon or 2 days new moon in that month. Do you understand what I just said? If they had a 1 day new moon, then, like for example, last month or during the Passover, like with the feast, the last feast that we celebrated, it does matter if you have a 1 day new moon day. If you have a 1 day new moon day, then the feast days will fall into the Sabbath. The feast of unleavened bread will fall right into the Sabbath on the 15th. If you have a 2 days new moon day, it will be the day. It will be the day after the regular Sabbath. So you're going to have the regular Sabbath. The day after that will begin will be a feast. I don't know if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, the feast day of first day of unleavened bread. Yeah.
So that means that you're going to have 2 Sabbath days, 2 holy Sabbath days back to back.
Back to back.
If you have a 2 days new moon day. So this has to be greatly considered. You have to keep that in mind. So what I don't know is, it doesn't tell us if they had a 2 days new moon. That's why I'm careful about when it comes to telling you that it's exactly, he came out exactly on the 21st or exactly on the 22nd. Because as you know, if you have a 2 days new moon day, then if you have a feast month and you have a 2 days new moon day, then your feast is usually the day after the Sabbath. But if you have a one day new moon day, your feast will fall right into the Sabbath, together into the Sabbath. Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, so like verse 62 seems to be the one that this next day. So this next day would be the day after they had crucified him. But we don't have any idea what day he was crucified. Not no exact day.
Yeah, so that's the thing. He was crucified days after he was arrested.
Right. So there's no way to tell. There's no way to tell by reading the text that he was crucified. The exact day he was crucified.
So the way you know,
it just says it. So in between the 15th and the 22nd, he was crucified.
Yes.
In between those, somewhere in between the 15th and the 22nd, he was crucified.
Yes.
And then he came out of the grave that following Sabbath, which would have been the 22nd.
Yes. And
or maybe even the 29th.
And then so what helps with this is that chapter 28 from verse 1 gives you an idea.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to mention. I'm just because I'm listening carefully because I'm also trying to get knowledge on this too. Because when you were talking about the 2-day new moon, I know that in the scriptures, like when you go to Chronicles, they make a difference between the first day of the month and the first day of the week. I don't believe that they were inferring that this is the first day of the month, but it was clear in Matthew 28 that was saying the first day of the week. So I think that kind of would nullify the confusion if it was going to be a 2 or 1 day new moon, because it goes on the 7-day week cycle after the first new moon. So they're just going by the weekly cycle, saying it's the first day of the week, not the first day of the month. And still the dates or the timing is still a little bit off. But I'm trying to follow you guys while I read the scriptures, but I'm not really coming to a conclusive number estimate on this.
Well, it's obvious from the reading that we did that Christ was definitely not crucified on Passover. Definitely not. And
I agree on that part. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So we see just from reading the text in Matthew 26:5, they said, we're not going to do it on the feast day. We're not going to put him to death on the feast day lest there be an uproar and the people start rioting and stuff. So they took him, and so let's say that they took him on the 17th. This is just hypothetical. If they took him on the 17th, and then he was going back and forth between Pilate and the governor and then the high priest, and they finally get him up where they're going to crucify him. And say they put him on the cross on the 18th or the 19th. Then he's crucified and he's dead, and he's going to be put in the grave before the sun goes down on that day. So now so that you got the 19th, the 20th, and the 21st. Those are 3 days right there. So I would say, yeah, he was probably crucified on the 17th, 18th, 19th, and then he comes out of the grave. That he's crucified on either the 17th or the 18th, and he's coming out of the grave on the 22nd on Sabbath, before Sabbath is over with. For it to be 3 days, because they said after 3 days he will rise again, right, in verse 63. And then you compare that with Luke 24, and in Luke 24 it definitely says why, because Christ comes up to me and says, why are you guys, at the end of Luke 24, they're asking him, why are you so sad? And what is it? And then they said, and verse, and besides all this, it is the third day. So I'm just looking for the verse. And that's at the end of Luke chapter 24. Verse 20. And how the chief priest and the rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and have crucified him. But we trusted that it had been, verse 21, that he should have redeemed Israel. And besides all this, today is the third day since these things were done. So he's crucified on the 17th or 18th. Absolutely. For him to be in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights, and he wasn't crucified on Passover, obviously from the text. So he had to be crucified on the 17th or the 18th, 19, 20, 21st, 19, 20, 21st, and he comes out of the grave on the 22nd before Sabbath's over with. That's what they left out the text.
So when you put this all together, and that's,
it took days.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to that's the light that I'm trying to shed on this. That, yeah, of course everybody knows that this thing doesn't make sense. Friday to Sunday makes no sense. So whenever I explain this, it usually takes time. I'm trying to first of all get you to understand that things were slow back then, and much was not done at night. A lot of things was done in the daytime. Because at night, once the sun goes down, things slows down. You don't have street lights, you don't have cars, so you will find it very difficult to understand what really happened here. Like I gave you the example with the chicken making noise. That only happens at dawn. And so if you don't have Matthew 28 from verse 1, then that would have made it difficult to understand. But this Sabbath here in Matthew 28 from verse 1 is the upper Sabbath from the previous Sabbath in the middle of the month during the full moon when they ate the Passover. This is the upper Sabbath. So you can now count backwards. So to get when he was crucified, and you count backwards from this Sabbath, go backwards 3 days backward, 4 days backwards, and you will have your number. So
yeah, that's right, because that's how I figured it out, just by doing exactly what you said. Mm-hmm. Is you have to count backwards 3 days from the Passover when he was taken and crucified.
No, you count 3
days backwards. It would be the 17th or the 18th.
You count backwards from what you see in math. So from the upper Sabbath. 28. Yeah, from the upper Sabbath, you count backwards. Yes. So then you'll be able to see it. But then if you count backwards and get that 3 days and 3 nights, you still have about 3 days left. That's when those events took place, going, back and forth. You already saw that just when he was arrested, that night was now spent. The rest of the night was spent just in the high priest's house alone. Just in the high priest's house alone. So it took days, and that's something that we did not. I know it sounds crazy to say that it took days. I've never had anybody say that. I think that most people just were comfortable. Nobody wants to say anything that is like, we're comfortable with the idea that he was, he died on Friday and came back to life or whatever, Good Friday. And we're comfortable with that. So if somebody comes and say that this thing took days because they're using the lunar calendar, they did not observe the Passover using Roman calendar. They observed the Passover using the moon. Now you have Matthew 28 from verse 1. That puts you over to the next Sabbath when he was coming out of the grave. So it took days for these things to happen. And with that, it's the confusion goes away. So you're not believing something that you know that this thing, I don't understand this, it makes no sense, but I'm just going to believe it because that's what we believe. No, that's Christianity right there. That's confusion. So, but when you understand that we're using our calendar back then, as I showed you from the book of Colossians chapter 2:16, and we're using the moon, it makes more sense. So Christ, yes. And then also, see, I always talk about, I say that Christian doctrines will lead people away out of the kingdom of heaven. Christian doctrines. So what is a doctrine? Like you go to website of churches, organizations, they tell you that this is our doctrine. So if you and I were to create a website for our congregation, this is our congregation. We are the congregation of the children of Israel. So this congregation doesn't belong to me. I did not found this congregation. Okay? So no man is the founder of the congregation of Israelites. No man is the founder. So if 3 of you gather together, you are a congregation. If 2 of you gather together, you are a congregation. Congregation of the children of Israel. So if we are to have on our website our doctrine, it will be the laws and the commandment. Period. If you want to see what we believe, go to the Torah. So, but that's not so in the Christian church. So every church and denomination have their own doctrines. Jehovah's Witnesses have their own doctrines. Seventh-day Adventists have their own doctrines. They have different doctrines. So oftentimes, these doctrines are looked upon. Regular people think that these are things from the Bible. They're not from the Bible. So, if because of the lies that we've been told, when it says that Christ is the Passover, does that mean that he was killed on the night of the Passover? When he himself told you that he is going to be arrested on the night and then be handed over. So people now misunderstand that. So if you're trying to fit and you've already come to a conclusion that he died on the Passover, then once you arrive to that conclusion, before looking for evidence, then you're going to have to try to backdate things and push it backwards, and or say that everything happened in one night. He was arrested tonight and killed the next morning. And so that in that way, it will also be able to fit into him coming out of the grave on Sunday, which justified us going to church on Sunday, which justified us having our so-called Good Friday. So if this is what people are trying, if that's the goal, then you might find yourself trying to fit things in, force it in to fit in. We don't have to do that. The truth is the truth. They were using a lunar calendar. He was arrested on the Passover. Then you go from there and you come to Matthew 28 from verse 1. That was the upper Sabbath. It's really that simple. His arrest, his humiliation, him on the cross, his death, all of this, resurrection, 3 days and 3 nights, they're all within that 1 week. Not Friday to Sunday. So, does that make sense, my brothers and sisters? So we can move on. If you still have any question about it, if you still want to, we could spend some more time on that. If not, we'll move on if anyone else have any other question relating to this or something else.
So you're explaining that the Friday to Sunday thing is a Christian doctrine?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. That's all I needed to know.
It's a Christian doctrine. And also the idea that because he's the Passover lamb, he must have died on the Passover. That's also a doctrine.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And just
Brother
because...
Tobiah, Sister Micheal here, shalom.
Shalom, sister.
I have a question regarding Mark 16 and 2.
Okay.
And it says, and very early in the morning, the first day of the week, they came unto the sepulchre at the rising of the sun. Now, Brother Tobiah, you've instructed us that, per the scriptures, that there are 3 types of days: new moon days, Sabbath days, and work days. Is it possible in the translation where it says the first day of the week, is it possible that that was mistranslated and what it might have said was the first work day? Is that possible? Given that our forefathers didn't adhere to a Roman Gregorian calendar, because then that first day of the week for them would be Sunday. But is it possible that after the Sabbath, we know that the day following the Sabbath would be the first work day? Just a thought. Thank you. Shalom.
Thank you. Whenever you see first day of the week in the scriptures, that's the day after the Sabbath. There's 4 first day of the week. 4 are actually, well, you have a day, you have a new moon day. It's still a first day anyways. So you have a new moon day, and new moon day is it's a new moon day beginning the month. After the new moon day, you have the first day of the week. You work for 6 days, you rest on the 7th day. After that 7th day, that the moon is half, the day after the Sabbath is always the first day of the week. There's 7 weeks, like 4 7 weeks in a month. 4 7 days in a month. 4 7 days. So our ancestors did not go by Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. They went by first day, second day, third day. So if you and I were living at that time, our appointment, when we have an appointment, we will say, oh, let's meet on the 3rd day, or on the 5th day, or on the 6th day. So our days were based on numbers, not on regular name or pagan god's name or something. It's based on numbers. So what you see in Mark 16 is a version of what you see in Matthew 28. It's the same thing. It's just that this is Mark's version. Now I have to also let you know, just in case, sometimes the two versions might not be exact in what they're saying. It may not be exactly the same thing. Just like if you and I witness something and we had to go home and write about it, when we do write about it and bring that paper together, it will not be exactly the same thing. Because what I see is not exactly what you see. Sometimes you and I are looking at something else will get my attention. I will look away, but you're watching. So you are going to definitely see that in Matthew, Mark, Luke, they may not be exactly saying the same thing. A brother mentioned that to me some time ago, brought that up, and I was trying to encourage him. That's okay. These are different versions of event. It's okay. It's not. And also remember that these things were translated by the Gentiles, who don't really understand the culture that they were translating. So just in case, they're not 100% identical in what they recorded. These 3 versions are not 100% identical, including John also. So Mark 16 is the version, or another version, Mark's version of what you see in Matthew 28. So this Sabbath here, when it says the first day, in Mark 16 verse 1, when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, they bought some stuff and spices. Verse 2, and very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. So it's the first work day of the week. after the Sabbath. This is going to be tomorrow, actually. Tomorrow is the first work day of the week. So actually, this will be like an anniversary of Yeshua getting out of that grave. This Sabbath, the third Sabbath of the month. So tomorrow will be the next morning. Tomorrow will be an anniversary of what actually was last month. Last month was the first month. So this was happening in the first month. So that first day of the week, so as of this time, at that period, these women would have been waiting right now because that day was the Sabbath day. They couldn't go. And Yeshua wasn't being led around the village on a Sabbath day to be crucified. Because everywhere gets shut down. Everywhere gets shut down on a Sabbath day. And if you want to lead him around and say that he broke a law, then that's just such a bad PR for the Pharisees. It will be very, very bad on their reputation, because the people understand you can't tell people to keep the Sabbath, not to break the Sabbath, and not to go to hunting on the Sabbath, not to do all this on the Sabbath. Then you turn around and you start leading him around on the Sabbath. So they had to observe that and acknowledge that. So yes, this Mark 16 here is referring to the day after the Sabbath. That first day of the week is the first work day of the week. Yeah. So, all right, my brothers and my sisters, does anyone else have any question relating to this? Before we go on to something else? Okay, all praises to the Most High. What I did get out of this, what we get out of this, is that there's nothing like the truth. And you see how this is all figured out. If we don't know about the lunar calendar, we will never understand this. It will make no sense. It will make no sense. Because all our life we thought they were using we thought there was only one calendar. We thought there was only one calendar. So if you're talking about the moon being a calendar, that makes sense, but we didn't see it like that. So this, knowing that the moon is the calendar, helps us to understand these things. It sheds light to these things, and it makes it more clear that Yeshua didn't come back to life on Sunday. Because you do understand what they're trying to do here when they say that he came back to life on Sunday. Do you understand the game that they're playing? This is to justify going to church on Saturday. So the Bible is telling you that these women went over there at the first day of the week. But that's not first day of man-made week. No, that's the first day of the lunar calendar, after the Sabbath, like tomorrow. So they have spinned it and trying to make you, so you think when you see first, when you let's just pretend that you don't know about the lunar calendar, you don't know about the moon being a calendar. If you read that Matthew 28 verse 1 or Mark chapter 16 verse 1, what do you think? Sunday. Oh, okay, that makes sense. We're going to church on Sunday because that's when he came back to life or whatever. But you don't realize, no, the first day of the week you read in the Bible is not the same first day of the week that you have today, being a Sunday. So that's why that narrative, we just keep quiet and nobody challenges it, and it helps to keep people going to church. But the first day of the week talked about in Matthew 28 verse 1 is not the first day of the week in a man-made calendar. No. All right. All praises to our Heavenly Father. I thank our Heavenly Father for opening our eyes, for helping us to understand these things. I give the Most High all the glory and all the honor for his love and his kindness, his mercy. All praises to him. As always, you can always bring this up. You can always ask questions. Okay, I will never tell you, oh no, brother or sister, we've talked about this so much. No, you can always bring this up whenever you want. I'm never gonna, say, oh, you're asking too much question. No, So all praises to Heavenly Father, all praises. So I pray and hope that this has helped you to have a better clarity as to what happened, and not, be wondering about this 3 days and 3 night thing, Friday to Sunday, because when it says first day of the week in the Bible, that's talking about the lunar calendar, the day after the third Sabbath of the month. That's what it's talking about. But because we don't know about the lunar calendar, we now think that, it's referring to, this must be talking about Sunday. Do you think our enemies, the Europeans, have any interest in clarifying this? Of course not. Because that keeps you going back to church with the mindset that you're going there because Jesus came back to life on Sunday or something. All praises to our Heavenly Father. Thank the Most High for His love and His kindness. All praises. Brother Linwood, this is your question. Are we clear? Does this answer does this make any difference in to the reason why you asked this question? Does this better explain your understanding of this? I always ask question to whoever asks a question at the end, just to make sure that you.
Oh, absolutely. I've gone through the scriptures and I've fixed the scriptures in my head to say what the scriptures actually say according to the lunar calendar, and I just counted backwards from the 22nd, and I came to the 19th. He was crucified on the 19th. That gives you your 3 days and 3 nights. And the 17th is when he was led out. I'm sorry. The 18th is when he was led out to be crucified. And then they hung him on the 19th, and he was in the grave before the sun went down on the 19th. So yes, it's clear as day.
Okay.
Thank you.
All praises to the Most High. All praises. Yes. So that's what I meant earlier on before we started, because I knew that this is not something that would take 5 minutes to explain, because we almost had to kind of psychologically go back to try to understand what happened in that period. That's why I told you in the beginning, because I've done this before. It usually takes time. The last time I did this, it took about 45 minutes or something. So it takes time to kind of get your mind. And I'm not trying to tell you something here and say just believe me. What I want to do is to take you along to show it to you. And you can never tell me that they had electricity back then. They had cars back then. Their police, their soldiers have military vehicle going around. No, life was slow, and they were using the lunar calendar. And he was arrested. Everything happened within 7 days. Within that period.
It's very obvious that it was a 7-day period.
Yeah.
It's very, very obvious. Because once a person understands that he had the supper or the meal on the 15th, he celebrated the Passover meal on the first day of unleavened bread. That means he was not crucified on the 14th. It's impossible. So he was taken the night of the 15th, and he was dead by the 19th, and he came out of the grave by the 22nd. Just count 3 days backwards, and that's where you get to the 19th.
Yep.
And that's exactly what the text is telling us. Once we understand the lunar calendar, not the Gregorian calendar or the calendar that was so discombobulated under the Romans that the astrologer Sosigenes, what's his name? Julius Caesar told Sosigenes to abandon the lunar calendar altogether. I have the quote, and it's right in the Webster's dictionary. I'll put it up in the post when I post it. Sosigenes quote: Julius Caesar told Sosigenes, the astronomer, to abandon the lunar calendar altogether because it was just messing up too bad for Rome. And that's when they came up with the Julian calendar and then the Gregorian calendar that the world uses today. So praise Yah, thank you very much, and that's exactly the way it really is.
Yes. So an average person, when they see the first day of the week, they're thinking Sunday. They're thinking, oh, that's Sunday. He came back to life on Sunday. No, they were using a different calendar. They were using the moon. That first day of the week, like it says, the preparation. Is there a preparation day in a man-made calendar? No. Have you ever heard of something called preparation day? Preparation day is only in the lunar calendar, the calendar of the Hebrews. No other nation in the world acknowledges something called the preparation day. Preparation day is that day that you start running around and start trying to get your stuff because tomorrow is the Sabbath. Because you know that tomorrow you cannot buy stuff anymore. Only the Hebrews has a preparation day. No other nation has that. So it tells you that it was the preparation day. So they were not using man-made calendar in Rome at that time, or in Jerusalem at that time. They were not using a man-made calendar. They were using the moon. That's why they have a preparation day, the day before the Sabbath. They had to wait until dawn. They could have gone there in the evening if they had wanted to. They couldn't go in the evening. They had to wait at dawn. So it's right there. You have it in your Bible. It's right there. You just need that, kind of understanding to be able to get it and understand what it's saying. It's really there. They were not using the moon because they mentioned the preparation day. Man-made calendar has nothing that has to do with preparation day. So they were using the moon and so all praises to the Most High. I thank you for everything. Like as I always do, I ask whoever asks a question just to make sure that they get it, and you got it, and I thank you for that. I thank you for opening our eyes and for teaching us. All praises to the Most High for everything.